Shirley here with Sirius Point of Thales. Um, and the moment that I realized that my Sirius moon is Sirius Point of Thales. So I have no chart because the internet is off, and I don't know why these Jews do it on the Shabbat. Bad gateway, but I do have YouTube, so I don't understand this so much. Well, manage people and their weird beliefs. And that's going to be a topic for this episode. So we are having Rahu in Pisces, and I try to get at the gist of the eclipses as they occur, because we already had a lunar eclipse in Pisces. Um, uh, we had one with Saturn on my ascendant, and for me it felt like I was saved from something, and then a tree had one of its branches, half of the tree was falling into the pavement. Very, very, very weird. Uh, but I don't know to tell the exact spirit of the exact. That is so sweet. I don't know to tell the exact spirit of that. I do know to tell one thing. We're going to have Neptune and Saturn in Pisces again for the last degrees. They're going to go, Saturn's going to go all the way to 27 degree Pisces. Neptune is going to scheme over the 29th, maybe 28 degrees, and go back to Aries. And then they're going to meet on the world degree. Rahu in Pisces happens every 12 years. Now, when something enters Pisces, it wants hope. This is a Jupiter-ruled sign, and it wants hope for humanity. And so Neptune marks the wealth that is both stealth wealth, but also the holistic type of wealth. For example, wealth is to have love during the time of the apocalypse. Okay, that's a Neptunian form of a miracle. Wealth is to have the right mindset and beliefs that actually serve your well-being and desire to live. And so when it comes to, but wealth is also big, giant, megalithic money, or even resources. Okay, a lot of people, I said a couple of times that I was, that because I did not agree to do corruption, and I had to fight for that with my life more so than I know, for more years than I have been aware of, then it created a situation where not only there was no job, but there was no ability to work, and my first degree was funded by the very people that agreed to work in work that cuts their dividends because they agreed to corruption, and then they had to fund me. Basically, that's what welfare means for some people. Because in my generation there weren't incorrupt workplaces that could accommodate for actual living. And so a lot of people would look at that and think that I live on their account, but actually they're living, they're cutting me dividends for living on my account, because I had no jobs, and I was willing to work in pretty much things. Even when I worked in cleaning things, I tended to the things that nobody wants to clean. And the normal cleaning, I was not good, but the cleaning that nobody wanted to clean, that was the things that was my expertise. the clients that nobody wanted to talk to. Okay? And so when there is corruption, I'm the person that's going to expose that, because I see the trajectory of where it's going. So let's say a person does human trafficking, I will not tackle that. You're a trafficker, you're this, you're that. I was like, okay, what's the underlying cause that caused you to do that? You are doing yourself a disservice, because it's a wealth block, it's an intimacy block, it's a sexual abundance block. Okay, the sexual energy, like anybody of the participants is doing such harm. It serves for political assassination. What the fuck is going on here? MK Ultra? Okay, then whatever you do, then do the steps to dissolve this MK Ultra. And so you understand that I got to tackle the topics that nobody wants to tackle. um, okay, dissolving corruption is not just about righteousness. It's also about, okay, there's a mechanism that is going on here that needs to be changed in favor of humanity. And this is the topic of this discussion, because with Rahu in Pisces, the generation that is taking over the wealth, and I saw this with people, whether it's um, uh, uh, um, whether it's the work of Jupiter in Sagittarius by Caitlin Kopok of Sphere and Sundry, that is coming from intergenerational wealth and all the things that you probably can't talk about, and the mentioning that, hey, Jupiter in Sagittarius gives hope that you can make wealth or make money doing something benefic. And for a day chart, that is actually a great thing. Or it's colleagues that are doing channeling and talked about the Saturn Neptune in Pisces as the generation, the new generation of wealth wants to make money in a way that is more benefic. I'm 41 years old. I have grown up, let's just say I lived in my high school, I lived with my parent and my grandparent to get the chance to to be at the best high school in the public arena that is as good as private high schools. So the mix of opportunities that was opened, and from a very young age, um, it was very obvious to me that these topics of wealth, business, and learning from the people that did that before is going to be important. And then I began to run into unreasonable things, because J.P. Morgan through IBM required me to think about innovation tips, where my colleagues were having innovation tips of technology that could make people that cannot speak with their partners be able to speak, and people that have disability be able to move their limbs. And those were high school children that had these ideas, even 10 times better than my patents. I have some good patents, but if they were even 10 times better than my patents. And JP Morgan was looking for the toothpasta hole that was increased by 2, and increase the revenue, because people just they do the usual things and they don't pay attention to the details. um, and I was like, the land of opportunities was opened, and everybody wanted to do dumb fuckery. And this is also why when I would be, let's say, teaching English, then I would look at the person, what are their dreams, what are their goals, what things they're good at and less good at, so that I can get to the nervous system, if it's computational, or which facets of the language needs to be attended to the most. And then we say, okay, we're going to work on your vision, but in English, because that's why they need the English for. Then they get connected, and then that derives something that is. But also my students were the ones that came from the families that understood that. I was the cherry on top. I I was the luxury that they got when they were tending to what they needed to tend to. And so um, and so I definitely can say that the calling for having wealth that actually makes sense is gigantic. It's my generation, the millennials, generations that are younger than my generation. They have a tremendous calling to have a wealth that makes sense. Okay, a wealth that, and this is the thing, that usually wealth, intergenerational wealth, has the third generation threshold, because we need to, each and every one of us, if you think of the third generation from our ancestors, we need to think about what the journey that they have been going through and how do we remediate that. For example, my grandmama lost her feet to working in a chocolate factory. And by the way, when I was going through tremendous mental crisis of 2008, I said, I don't know, give me a job, a regular job. Then I saw that people that worked at the chocolate factory that have like mental issues, um, then they give them pills that make them hungry because they interfere with absorption of minerals, which actually further deteriorates the nervous system. You need to support the nervous system. Um, and then they cannot touch the chocolate. Now, my grandmother, why she had diabetes, she was tasting everything, and she was, if she would not come to work, then people did not know how to make the recipe for the chocolate. But then she also had a problem, Pisces. So she had a problem with what people would call it manic depression, but it's not manic depression. It's basically that there were places in her psyche that were not developed. She married very young to my grandfather, and then I was the person who was singing, who was creating, and I couldn't work on my feet. I worked for 4 years in McDonald's, but then I couldn't work on my feet. I was vegetarian while working in McDonald's, so it's beyond funny. And I had no problem with to clean the tables, to this. I had no problem with to work, but the jobs, the everyday jobs, became impossible. Not even a chair to sit if you are a cashier or something like that. Something beyond unreasonable, and it blocked my way to have a regular job like my grandparents. And so I had to innovate, and through learning about my diseases, as okay, but I cannot work on my feet, and said, okay, then I will work customer service. Customer service was credit card company, and they wanted to fool their customers. I couldn't do it. Then we had an option, and the opportunity was something that they used to fool the customers to alleviate the debt of people. And I found that, and for me, I said, okay, there's no problem. It doesn't cost them any money. They have to know when is the card going to cost money, and they can get rid of the interest. And so for what I did, now, my grandfather's family died in the Holocaust. They were Jews. I don't know what they did with interest, okay? I'm not saying that they didn't. They came from Sarny, but I don't know the entire family. The entire family went extinct now that my grandfather is dead, and so I have no idea, okay, for what went on there, or even what karma am I correcting, or am I continuing on? My grandfather was only at the grocery store, and everybody were against him being a business. So he had to deal with not protection, but kind of. And so when we think about, and from my father's side, and fathers in plural, because there's an issue to do with ritual abuse that affected sperm count, and crossing two religions and two countries, continents. So you think about us as the third generation thinking, okay, my grandmother didn't get to sing and express herself, and my grandfather also didn't get to express himself like intellectually, and so I was a young born intellectual to my family. And nobody told me that. I felt like the Enlightenment was my family, which was another karma to tend to, because a lot of what we call the Enlightenment was built on ritual abuse, and I'm tending to that as well. So, because the generations that are now supposed to take over the wealth, to continue on the wealth, they're dealing with what the problems of the past is always going to happen. Okay, this is why intergenerational wealth is usually lost to the third generation, because what created the wealth needs to be rejuvenated. And when I tended to, for me, when I tended to currency, I said, only problem is like, okay, for the outdated rituals of child trafficking, human trafficking, organ harvesting, for that we need to do away with. And then it clears the path so we can actually make wealth that makes sense. So it's a small thing, it's stupid, it's archaic. The older generations, they relied on that because they didn't know better. First, where's the problem? Okay? And I still think that way. But people, but the recovery process for people is a process, and it's challenging. And yet, it is also why the grandchildren, also for those of you that are thinking about making intergenerational wealth, try to think of the structure of your wealth in a way that your children's children can access that while transmuting whatever you couldn't tend to. Okay, for example, the state of the soil is so terrible that I honestly don't know if I could be vegan or not. I honestly don't know. If there was good soil, and you think about a building up soil is going to be one of the greatest projects. So my children's children, okay, if I think about my grandmother, she came, the family went from Eastern Europe to Cuba. So meat was the specialité, even if it's only chicken, okay? It was made by a person that cooked in a Cuban, okay? And so, and chocolate is made of milk. And then when I explored the, vegetarian, veganism, and so on, there is also the issue of how agriculture is created, and many things to that. Very likely, whether it's by a bloodline or by adoption, my children's children, and that can be the people that are inspired from the people that are inspired from my thinking as well. It can be also lineage in the intellectual sense. They will very likely need to tend to these problems. I cannot predict if it would be possible to be vegan. What would be the good with the humanistic? Humanistic is also for animals. What would be the best thing at this time? Okay, for example, cows used to eat people. Then people made the cows edible. Okay, it had pros and cons. And the environment changes, and so it makes sense that at a certain time we no longer need to eat cows. So you want to think about, if you're thinking about intergenerational wealth, you want to think about, hey, what am I dealing with? My children's children are going to continue on that. And so the structure of how we store and preserve the wealth needs to support their being able to to rejuvenate on our practices and and in a way that is adaptable to the spirit of the times. For example, I do astrology. A person that would live on Mars or would live on another planet, or maybe would create a planet, I don't know, they would need to innovate on perhaps gravitational waves or whatever the sciences and the sensors that tend to the different frequencies of light that and components and matter that are comprising of the planets and create the alchemy and to work with that in completely different fashion than I do. Of course, I started thinking about that, but the people 3 generations from me um, would would bring that into completions in ways that I today cannot foresee. And so one of the things that I see in the wealth transition is the fastest the planets play a part in the ritual. So Jupiter would be the beliefs that people have into and archaic beliefs. Okay, people born to believe that they have to pay for everything, nothing is for free, and this is not, it's not true. Okay, there is when you breathe in and breathe out, you don't think about this process, and there is something that is happening naturally where if you put consciousness into that, unless you are deepening your breath or your breathing and so on, you will interfere in the natural process of things. Now sometimes when the things go wrong, you do place your consciousness and see what's in there. You tend to that. And so when it comes to or beliefs that they have choice, where all the conditions were taken away from them to actually have the conditions that are needed for choice, which is um, the access to their sovereignty, and yet the choice needs to be there anyway so that they can access that sovereignty. There's something very, okay, we talk about the Jupiter of Pisces. Choice needs to be there. They need to have the option to say no so that they can practice choice, and to put excess responsibility is something that is not building up to an actual formed worldview, philosophy, and religion. Okay, the Jupiter is about optimism, and when a child is growing, then it needs to be optimistic about being able to do things, and so that the challenges, when they arise, is something that they can have the sense of being able to deal with. I remember when I was at the family doctor, and he checked my pulse. I was very young. I was around 20, my 20s. It's a peak of fertility. He checked my pulse and so on. He said, "This is, but there were ritual done on my psychic state, and I said, this is a very young, fertile woman, which explains why the rituals were done." But okay. And he said to me, "What the problems in your life?" He says to me, this was one meeting with family doctor, and my parent was there, and he says to me, "Every problem in life has solution." It says all your problems, all of them, they have solution. And that was, and you think about that as something that is very benefic. Yes, as something that I remember benefically. I was like, hey, I ran into a person that believes that. And so, and this is important because a part of ritual abuse is to make people believe that they have no option, that there is no choice. Okay, it's both giving them and say, but this is your choice. You made this choice. You have to take a responsibility. Where the actually never the choice was invalid because they were tortured to say or to act or to do something, and then saying there's no opportunity, it's no this, it's no that, it's this, these are the options, these are the rules. Okay, but there's always an opportunity, there's always a choice. Okay, so this is when it comes to the belief. People tell, no, we can't make money without human trafficking, we can't make money without crime, we can't make money without this. Well, this is wealth that crumbles. It doesn't stand the test of time for more than 3 generations. And then people have to steal, and stealing is not wealth. If everything is written on the trust fund, it's kind of like Switzerland. And Switzerland told to both the people that were persecuted by the Nazis, some of which were Nazis, and the Nazis, what money? And it did that again actually quite recently, at the end of Pluto in Capricorn. We had the founder, the CEO of Leumi Bank. It's not at the time that I was working, she was not the CEO, there was a guy that died, but then she became the CEO, and she was one of the people that was exposed. She has a Swiss bank account. Yitzhak Rabin's spouse had a Swiss bank account, and he resigned from being Israeli prime minister at the time that it was not allowed to have a foreign bank account. So what Switzerland did is saying, we're not going to traffic, they're going to take all the wealth of the people that traffic and we're going to confiscate that wealth. This is why Switzerland is wealthy. It's the offshore banking of those who traffic, but there are windows, and those windows are astrological. Okay, you see Pluto at the end of Capricorn. I don't know what was the story with Yitzhak Rabin. At the end of the bisextile after the World War. Right now is another trajectory, is another bisextile. And so they take the money, they take the money, they take the money, they take the money. They confiscate the money that came from other people doing the trafficking. And then they tell to the traffickers, what money? So if you think that Switzerland is a tax haven, think again. And this is why wealth does not sustain the third generation. And then for the Swiss, they have the best democracy, the best this, the best that, but they all have to be bankers, which of course doesn't stand the test of time. And might be one of the predictions. I don't know Switzerland all that well, but you see, the people that tell you that you can get your wealth done by stealing without transmuting that, and it's not about doing organ harvesting and human trafficking and then transmuting that, because then it's kind of like an Ouroboros. And everybody's wealth gets lost in the process. Now, the children that grew up in those situations, even those generations, they want to make the wealth differently. And so what is happening is places where there was a ton of human trafficking stored in banks in Switzerland, and then the bank says, what money? That's what confiscated the wealth of both the people that were persecuted by the Nazis, not all of them, some of which were trading in interest rates and okay. And again, the problem is not that you give a loan. The problem is how do you charge the person back, and when. and that if you give a loan to someone to develop a business, and the business is benefic to humanity, and then you cut dividends from the loan, you made a good deal. You allowed something to grow. That's okay. But for when you said, oh, your business not allowing, now we're going to traffic your children, traffic this, traffic that, and Arbeit macht frei. And we can't ignore that. And this is also why, but the people that made the Arbeit macht frei, because they wanted to capitalize on that wealth by enslaving, they also lost their wealth. The wealth was confiscated. Some people managed to escape to Argentina. I don't know, okay? But they were also under the constant threat of being haunted by their peers that didn't get their wealth. Okay? Now, that's the trajectory. And what's happening is that is first generation, second generation, third generation, wealth confiscated. And so this is where people say, hey, I want to make wealth or intergenerational wealth in a way that makes sense. That is the time where we tend to, all the junk comes out. And you think about it, every 3 generations, and you think about the fact that for me, it's almost every generation, because if I'm the third generation, my parents are the third generation of the First World War, of the Russian, okay, for the Russian thingy. Okay, my parents, for example, traveled a lot. And they learned how to deal with money in a way that even if it's not a lot of money, then they know how to deal with that. These are the generation of basically the aftermath of the First World War and the aftermath, which is the financial crisis. Okay, my children will have to, whether it's the people, if you are listening to me directly and you're inspired by me, then you need to know about my parents, because their journey and their philosophy has to do with you, and also the things that where my philosophy is not so good for your journey has to do with that. My parents are the ones that learn to deal with the little that they have and make and still travel and still grow children and still, okay, so for some of you, what my parents didn't get to do, then you will get to do, whether it's having a house with a farm, okay, the cabin in the woods, and the many dreams that they had. Okay, a lot of you are Americans, because my parents were living in United States for a while. Okay, but from Israel and from Netherlands, and they were living in United States for a while. If they would have me in United States, I end up like Teal Swan, which I don't know. Okay, so definitely rituals done on me, and so. And you think about, if you are listening to me, then perhaps you're escaping the Mormon cult, because this is where my parents couldn't have that house in a farm in the big America, because they'd have to deal with the Mormon issue, and some of you might be Americans that are living a Mormon cult. And you get to have that dream without the Puritanism, the Mormonism, the Jesuits, and the associated mafia, and the slavery and so on, whether it's being slave owner or being enslaved. So with Rahu Pisces, a lot of us are going to make further steps in creating and transitioning the wealth so that our children's children get to both enjoy that and rejuvenate on our practices so that they can create it for their children's children and not to have this thing lost in trafficking. So the issue of lost wealth is not about repeating the elder's mistake, but rather actually because we don't repeat those mistakes, we rejuvenate the wealth and it can look like wealth lost. You also think about the issue that, let's say, I have my maca chocolat, okay? And you think about it. I'm half Israeli, half Dutch. My grandmother worked in Elite Factory, which is the most famous Israeli factory for chocolate. And the other side is Dutch. When I was homeless in Netherlands, somebody asked what to buy me. I said the shelter provides nearly everything. So they bought me, and I didn't want to ask for what I don't absolutely need. I said, and then I said the one thing, I want the Dutch chocolate. And she took me to a place in the pipe where they made exactly that chocolate. They roast it differently in Netherlands. It was very tasty, and I was like, that was so amazing. We had a nice walk. Uh, everything was closed, and so and you think about how the cocoa actually plays into my ancestry. So think about the fair trade of this product. But this time, when I had my moon days, I bought the Choco Maca. It's very expensive, but if you think about all the sweets that you buy, it's the same price, and the difference being that this one was actually nourishing. Chocolate cocoa is a superfood. It's basically supposed to be a nourishing food. Some people say even better than coffee, I don't know. And it has the maca powder, and it has the carob powder, and all these things. And I drank that with a spoonful of coconut oil, a drop of orange essential oil just for the good taste. It mixes in the oil, so the essential oil mixes in the oil. Some pepper, turmeric, and cinnamon, and instead of having sugar cravings, I received superfood nutrition. And then I would see snacks and stuff like that. It was nothing. So you think about the fact that my grandmama lost her feet to the way they made sweets in Elite Factory. And also we lost our house. They split the house. They had to split, and so the asset was lost, the house that she bought, and perhaps it's a part of rejuvenating on the cocoa trade, on the way we drink cocoa. That, okay, for example, cocoa trade, having the fair trade. On the conditions of the people that harvest, okay, to go into the places where my grandparents couldn't go and rejuvenate that wealth. So now the people that drink that have a superfood that nourishes them, even though it's more expensive, and the produce is coming from places ethically sourced, both by the labor conditions and by the way we treat the land. And not only that, I drank that not with milk, but with coconut powder. Not coconut, not powder, coconut oil, a spoonful of coconut oil, and it mixed in with all the things, with all the good things that, so it came from being something that you crave and you answer in a way that causes, I'm sorry, binge eating, to something that's actually nourishing superfood. And in that sense, the wealth is being rejuvenated. And so these are a lot of things that go into that, but the currency that we trade also need to have different, more benefic rituals around that are not of human sacrifice. And then the money, we have all the information with Neptune in Pisces. I was writing for the comments to Teal Swan, because she tends a lot with this wealth mindset and so on, and she came from surviving satanic abuse, and she gives all the good things, all the wealth mindset. And we come into the Venus now, which is you are entitled to live good. This is the Venus part. There's the Jupiter part, the solution for every problem. You're a divine being, there's always a choice, and so on. And then there's the Venus part. You are entitled to good food, you're entitled to nourishment, you're entitled to rest. You are deserving of love that is actually loving. It's not transactional love. And now, of course, there is energy exchange, and there is not just energy exchange, matter exchange. Okay, if a lady is pregnant and she's nourishing her baby, and she's after pregnancy she's nourishing her baby, yes, then somebody else makes the food for her, somebody else brings the money home. Of course there is exchange, but if it comes to purely transactional relationships, then we lose the love in the way, and that is a tension of existence that we hold, about love being also unconditional. Actually, Teal Swan has great teachings around that, and perhaps the sources that contributed to that um, being acknowledged, also by the dividends, is perhaps the next step. Okay, maybe that was done, but perhaps if it was done by the dividends, then done by the naming and the sources, and so on and so forth, because she escaped basically human trafficking, and she had to build something that is economically sustainable as a spiritual teaching that negates the satanic ritual abuse. So there are facets and facets and facets and facets to that. Basically, if my parents would have had me where they were thinking to have me, I would end up like Teal Swan. And so when you think about the rejuvenation of the wealth, is something that is natural for people. Okay, our children usually argue with us and they have good points. Our grandchildren also, they reconnect with us, but they also have arguments with us and they have good points. They continue on our path in things that we could not predict for 3 generations ahead. So right now, Rahu in Pisces, it's good to think about the big wealth. And also when you think about something you're passionate doing, okay? It's usually Mars, but also pertains to that, an idea you're passionate about, then you see me recording these videos, I don't have to think about that. And I don't even have to think about the trajectory of when that manifests into matter or manifests into resources. If something that the wealth created is so vast that even if it doesn't have a currency, okay, stamp on that, then, and the rituals around the making of that currency need to be actually benefic and to acknowledge the opportunity, the chances, the choice, and the value that people are entitled to well-being. Amazing. No, I want to... Don't ruin that. Okay. Yes, I'm recording. Yes. Not everything is good blended. and so when we think about the creation of the currency, or the creation of that thing that allows us, that if you have 2 ships and I have 3 apples, and you're like, your apples are nice, but I'm not into apples. I'm like, okay, I also have $10. I'm like, that is sweet, because I can exchange that for many things that I cannot do with just my ships. So we get the benefic attributes of currency without the ritual sacrifice. And we remember that people are entitled to exist in a way that is actually supportive for them. And those are the Venus teachings. And we also remember that if we don't have enough wealth to accommodate for that, then there is a hidden thing that we need to look at, because there is more than enough when it comes to our food. It's ancient traditions of how to properly kill the food, or properly harvest the plants. And the rituals that are outdated, it's time to rejuvenate them. And every family has their rituals. And so if you get just the teachings without the ritual, you get a part of that. But then if you get the ritual and the ritual is outdated, it stops yielding. This is why people go talk about Opus Dei, talk about the church, talk about the Catholic Church, talk about the Pope. Even the new Pope is not exempt. Okay, he inherited the bank. He needs to make, the expectation is that the current bank will now operate differently. And even the mafia, not exempt. It's like, well, the mafia, but if you trade children, if you traffic people, and the courtesan, it affects our health system, because when we come to treat a patient, we cannot have, we are subjected to a artificial courtesanic perception of their ailments, defragmented, so we never get to diagnose and cure a patient. This is a novel model. This is what was evidence-based medicine. Now they have, and the more they advanced into machine learning and deeper things, they advanced into traditional Chinese medicine, iridiology, and what people call sham medicine. Okay, that was, I remember when I took a look at more advanced research after writing my thesis proposal and beginning to work on my thesis, I was like, oh, something is happening in the medical field. And the calling is no longer suffice. Even people that heal, let's say ladies that were trafficked and were in the sex work and want to heal from what happened to them. So what they need to get over is the courtesan, and then they begin to connect with their essence of sensuality. They like completely different things in bed. And they're like, oh my God, that affected the sexual fantasy. They think, oh, the ritual abuse affected the sexual fantasy. Yes, but they were also doing mind control to try to perpetuate that, So people couldn't have their orgasm by their own natural sensual desire. Now what happens when you drink that cocoa that's actually a superfood? You no longer need to buy a ton of food that's not nourishing. When you have the orgasm that is actually in alignment with your senses, you no longer need to have a ton of sex or to avoid sex and have a ton of food or have addictive patterns to relationships. And not only that, that which tried to keep you within those trajectories is dissolving. So Ra in Pisces has a lot to do. Yeah, we can look at that moon Uranus, the spirit of matter alignment. Oh my God. Jupiter. It was Saturn's hour. So let's see. I started recording in Saturn's hour, but I'm going to release that on Jupiter's hour. Yes. Very likely. Or let's see if we open the table. Let's see when was Saturn hour. 1:51 till 2:57. So no. It's I did start this on Saturn hour, but that's life. Gonna post it then about getting to fix that, and it's Jupiter's hour now. But you see, this is exactly the topic we are dealing with this currency, and the new wealth that needs both the wealth mindsets, the understanding that we are deserving to live better than our parents and grandparents. Okay, one of the best intergenerational wealth sentences is we are deserving to live better than our parents and grandparents. And if you think about why it makes sense, because when our parents need to retire, okay, we fund that. Our wealth is supposed to be enough for them to not have to work and for them to have enough to retire and travel the world. So we are supposed to live better than our parents and grandparents because the dividends are coming from us. It's not just, okay, the intergenerational wealth is exponential in the sense that when we live better than our parents and grandparents, then, okay, if my grandmother was tasting probably better chocolate than the most industrial chocolate that Elite makes right now. I was buying. My parent wanted to buy ice cream and a guava drink. Yes, and I bought that, and they didn't like the ice cream, and they didn't like the guava drink, and I was like, that's not what they used to make. Okay. So something was lost, but then when I had my cocoa, it's something that my grandmother didn't have. And I drink better chocolate than my grandmother. I make even better chocolate than my grandmother because it's both a superfood and tasty. So I live better than my grandmother. My chocolate is nourishing. My chocolate is not annihilating people's feet, but actually contributing to them not having diabetes. You think about it, oh, could we make a chocolate that doesn't give people diabetes? I was like, that's the origin of cocoa. Yeah, you just have to go a little bit backwards and bring that to today's culture, but without the ritual sacrifices that they were doing. And this is how wealth is rejuvenating. So I hope this leaves people with a sense of optimism, and as we begin to establish the framework that will replace ritual and satanic abuse, understanding that it's not taking away from the chances to sustain, but actually um, creating an opportunity to have um, intergenerational wealth that stands the test of time, and to lay the foundations for something that stands the test of time, and not in a way that is malefic. Okay, it stands the test of time in a way that is genuinely benefic. And this is not something that, okay, this is not something that anybody needs to steal, because they have, if it speaks to you and you say, oh, I must take this creative power, I must say, no, you don't. You have this in your lineage. If you hear that and you think that this is something that you want to do, then amazing. It means you already have that in your lineage. And it's about actually not doing ritual abuse, actually not doing trafficking, that where you get to the wealth that's actually wealthing. So my okay, so this is where those of you that are doing banking and are working on fair banking, then I have the fair banking asteroid next to Sedna, which is about the notion that a woman needs to be free both in and outside a relationship. She needs to be able to be single and still have food and still have housing, and our society needs to accommodate for that. And also the rituals that the ancestor practiced for power, yes, if it's trafficking a woman, or trafficking a child, or trafficking a person, okay, or a man, also men are trafficked, then it's going to take down the entire village of that. That's what happened to Sedna's father, okay, that there was hunger and people had to appease Sedna, because they knew that they did her wrong, okay? Always listen to the BIPOC people that don't have it all together, because they're going to tell you the real story. They're the ones that suffered from this trafficking. They're the ones that tell you sex work is work, and then they make everybody have the conditions that they had with the sex work. And so where I came from, my trajectory, I was like, yeah, I saw that the working sector needs to be rejuvenated. We need better working rights. We need better environment, and it's not against wealth, but actually for wealth that is inclusive and it's not based on slavery. Okay, I have Jewish ancestors. When people talk to me about the chosen or the chosen people, I would try not to laugh in their face. Because this is the way the third generation loses the wealth. And I'll tell you a story from Israel, so you will have a little bit, because everybody, the Jewish way, they make money, they this, they that. Well, why do they die so much? Why is so much anti-Semitism that they have to split families apart every couple of generations? Bolshevism, Khazarian, and so on. So I have a story, and this was a lady in Israel. She called herself the Solid Investor, and She was investing also in weapon industry, and she would give also good tips of investments and taking financial responsibility. She said, I invest in weapon industry and I sleep well with that. And